Okay. So, happy Friday to everyone. It is Friday, April 10th, and this is the Elevate Academy. And the Elevate Academy is a spot for people who love sports, especially student athletes, young kids, their parents, their families, anyone who's just a lover of sport. And especially during these crazy times, what the Elevate Academy is all about is bringing on some amazing guests to talk about a wide range of topics and who can just either inspire us, give us some refreshing news or their take on how they're handling this current coronavirus and everything that's going on. So today we have Kely Nascimento-DeLuca. Now, Kely is the daughter of probably the most famous soccer player ever, Pele. And as great it is to be the daughter of Pele, and I'm sure people always want to ask you about being that daughter, and we'll get into that. But really what we want to talk to Kely about is about her and about her journey as a women's soccer player, as a filmmaker, and those are the things we're going to talk about. Now, Kely, welcome to the Elevate Academy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's awesome. It's awesome to get on here with you. I've been looking forward to this one. As soon as our good mutual friend Susie Petroselli, Susie had put us together.
Yeah.
Susie was a Harvard soccer player. She just wrote her own book, which we'll make sure we plug that as well. But Susie's also a producer on your documentary, correct?
Yes, correct.
So,
yeah.
All right, so let's get the Pele stuff out of the way right away. So I'm a New Yorker. I grew up playing soccer as a kid. And when it was announced that Pele was coming to the Cosmos, it was like, we couldn't even believe it. And it was just an amazing thing. So I grew up a fan of Pele. What's it like to grow up as the daughter of Pele?
I feel like I should have a much more incredible answer for that. Sometimes I just say I've never been anybody else's daughter, so I have very little comparison.
That's a good one.
It was, I think, very normal given his status, because my parents were always, I think it's had to do with the being from Brazil and not and being from a small although not tiny, but a small island in the coast of Sao Paulo. And also I think it was really brilliant of my mom to move us to New York. She was one of the big sort of supporters of the idea. She really wanted us to live somewhere where it was less of a fishbowl for us. And New York is the perfect place because no one gives a crap who you are. So it was a good place to come.
So you're really a native New Yorker then?
I'm a New Yorker. Yeah, I was 8, 9 when we moved here. 8 actually.
So are you in New York right now?
Yeah.
So quarantining. I see the pictures of friends of mine who are kind of on the front lines, either policemen, firemen, nurses, doctors, and they're posting pictures of just empty New York, and it's kind of scary. How are you guys handling this whole situation right now?
It's really scary. It's I think like everybody else, like my husband's a pediatric pulmonologist, so he goes in and he sees kids, so emotionally, he's not in the ICU. Kids get better, which is good. But,
right.
It's a very bizarre, scary time. I think, he's here. This is a guy who doesn't even like to wear a lab coat because he doesn't want to intimidate kids. And now he's going in looking like something out of, a sci-fi movie.
Sure.
And hope just making parents feel better. It's very stressful. It's stressful not to be able to do anything about it, not to be able to help in any way. And then the kids are, listen, to be honest, in our little world right now, I'm not going to lie. My kids have adjusted extremely well to having like a 24/7 open kitchen and Wi-Fi and not having to go to school. Surprisingly well.
Absolutely.
But it is, it's stressful. It's really, it's hard to think of all the people that are suffering, so close. It's this empty streets. I miss the smell of the subway. And I know that's a hard, and I know that makes me lucky that I get to be thinking about these things right now, So,
well, even though you miss the smell of the subway, I'm kind of hoping though that when we get back to normal, that subway might smell a little bit better the next time you get on.
For at least an hour. For about 45 minutes, it'll smell better.
What's amazing is I saw pictures in Italy, and you know, they had pictures in Naples and stuff, and it's like, it's incredible how much cleaner everything is right now.
Yeah.
And so who knows? You know what? I'm literally the eternal optimist. I'm always looking to try to be positive. So I'm looking at this as, hopefully this has just been a gigantic human reset, and
I agree.
we're all going to be much better off of it. And
I know it's a terrible word to use right now, or it just seems extremely inappropriate. But part of what I spend my time thinking about is, I'm kind of excited to see what good things come out of this. You know, not that this could ever be, you know, perceived in any way ever as something good, sure, but, you know, giving us all this pause, and also the restructuring of how everything that we do. You know, I'm excited to see what the world will look like in a year or two, and when we've sort of, you know, rethought all the way we do everything, right? Yeah. Businesses, I mean, everything. And I think that's, you know, I read somewhere that if you know, if we go back to being exactly the same, then something terribly wrong happened. Yeah,
you know? We didn't learn.
Yeah.
You know, that's what sports teaches us, though, right? And you know, and it's one thing that we're trying to always explain to the kids that we coach in all the sports. And I've coached, you know, just about everything. I still coach lacrosse. I coach soccer. I travel soccer. Ice hockey. I never coached my girls in field hockey, and I think they were happy about that. But
yeah.
You know, all the things that we teach them is that it's okay to make mistakes. But you need to learn from those mistakes.
Yeah, and exactly.
Here, if we can learn from this, it was interesting. I went out on I do a morning walk every morning, and I always kind of walk in the same direction. And I'm with my dog out on some trails, nobody else out there. 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I decided to change up my route. And the funniest thing is, I've taken a picture of my dog on this one rock, and I have a great picture of her on that rock. I came back the other way, and I'd never seen it before. On the front side of the rock, someone spray painted "love," and I'm like,
"Oh,
I never saw it this way."
Yeah, that's great.
Something from a different perspective, from a different angle.
Yeah.
So I sent that out to all the kids that I coach today, and you know,
that's awesome.
You know, and yesterday I was having a little pity party for myself. I was just having a bad day, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? We're okay. It's okay to have a bad day.
Yeah.
And you know, get on with the next one.
Yeah, that's definitely, you know, and that's another thing that, you know, there's a busyness that comes, you know, mercifully with having like a house full of kids. Demanding, you know, and they're being lovely. They really are. I'm actually impressed at how great they're being. But, you know, too much time to think isn't great. And also being able to say, listen, I'm not making anything today. Like there's bread, there are cold cuts. I need a day in my room. Yeah. And that's okay. You know what I mean? That's okay. Like, you know, I'll reemerge soon. Feel free to come in and ask me anything you have questions about. Sure. But I need a timeout. And that's
How many kids do you have?
I have 4.
What do you got?
I have 19, almost 18, 15, and 9.
Okay, so I have 26, 21, and 19, all girls.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm the youngest of 6. So.
Are you really? Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up, it was 3 and 3, but very matriarchal family. So it's interesting. You know, having 3 girls, I've pretty much only coached girls sports. And even in the program that we have now, Team Elevate, which is our lacrosse program, we only have girls. We don't have boys teams. And people have asked me all the time, oh, why don't you add boys? And I always felt that in the beginning when we were starting this, that we needed a program that was just for girls so that they felt it was important for them, that this program was built around them, because we actually came from a program that was boys and girls, and the girls got treated like second-class citizens. They really did.
Yeah.
And it was very upsetting to them. It was frustrating to them. But once again, you know, we learned from it. And because of that, we started out with one team, and now we're empowering young women to be the best they can be. I want to jump into Warriors of a Beautiful Game.
Okay.
Where did you come up with, I mean, you lived it. But
Well, I hate to disappoint again, but I never played soccer.
really,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm not a soccer player.
I
No, I
read an
never did.
article that said you were a soccer player, so that's why I thought that.
No, no. I'd like to say that, but I wasn't. I was actually, yeah. So the idea for the documentary came from, I'm a photographer and graphic designer, and I'm a storyteller really. And I met this young woman through my brother-in-law, who's a soccer coach in New York, and he's Brazilian. He teaches young people in New York, a youth soccer coach. And every summer he takes some of his students and their parents and whoever wants to go to Brazil for like a couple of weeks, and he does sort of tours of some major clubs in different cities, and then he'll do at least one favela club where he gives a tour of the club because they have their own structure, they have their own tournaments, their own everything. And this year, I think it was 2012, he went and he met this young woman, and she was 14, she was a baby, and
Right.
she was playing in the middle of all the boys. She was super skinny, she was she was just but she was phenomenal. And he said everyone noticed she was phenomenal. All of his students that he brought and their parents were in awe of her. And when he got home, he's like, listen, we have to get her in here, we have to get her out of there, there's nothing for her there, no one will ever see her, there's nothing. Not because of where she was, but because she was in Brazil, sadly. Right. The country of football, right? So he worked for the next couple of years. He coaches in the Upper West Side, and a lot of the parents of his students are really good at supporting a lot of his scholarship students. So together they all sort of looked for a place for her, and then she also spent 2 or 3 years, really, or 2 years, it was really getting her English better and studying really hard and trying to, make it pass the TOEFL so she could come. Sure. And we started a friendship, mostly through WhatsApp. And I remember, like, in retrospect now, every few months, these like 2 some years, she would tell me that some scout was coming from the national team, that she'd heard through her coach, and that she was training super hard, and she was so excited. And at the end of like 2 years plus, nobody ever came, ever. And this is a hotbed, right? I mean, this is where, like, the woman that one of the women who she was coached by, has Formiga has gone past her, Marta has gone past, like, this is Salvador, this is a hotbed of talent. And that was the beginning of where I started to realize, I'd never thought much about women's soccer, and, I am a woman and I am South American. So, I mean, systemic sexism wasn't something that was shocking to me. It's just that I hadn't thought much about how it sort of, played itself out in that specifically. And so she got here, and her story is phenomenal. She came to this ASA college, is a junior college in Brooklyn, and she joined their team. She made the cover of all the local papers because, they won that year, their division or whatever. Within the same time, someone saw her who knew Becky Burley at University of Florida and gave her a call and said, you should look at this girl. And Becky's like, listen, I don't go in to look at people, but also, we don't have any other foreign students, and we don't take junior high school students, just for 2 years. But she goes, but you know what? I'll have someone I know in the area, if they can, they have a chance, they'll go see her. They gave her a full scholarship for 2 years. And in the meantime, she had her first cell phone.
She's a Gator?
Yeah, she's a Gator. She graduated last winter. But so within the same time frame, as soon as she got here, they got her a cell phone and they had a camera. So she asked some of her friends that she made to take videos of her, and she put together a reel through the help of somebody else. And through Facebook, sent it to a girl that she knew from home who had been in the U20 national team, and asked this girl to ask her dad to send it to the coach. So she
gotta love her get-go-ness right there.
Right? And she ended up being the captain of the U20 national team in Papua New Guinea.
Wow.
And at the end of all this, I think I was so amazed by her and so inspired by her, but I was also so pissed, because her story cannot be replicated. Right? I mean, it was, and not to take anything away from her, it was an incredible amount of tenacity on her part, and, and passion, but also some divine intervention in many places along the line. So it wasn't a path that any other girl could take. So, which meant that there was no path for any girl from Brazil. Right. So I started researching women's football. And, I was just, every day I would, like, call up my creative partner and be like, can you believe this? You know, who was like, he's American, knew nothing about football. And you know, at some point we're just like, we have to tell this story. And so, yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, it's funny because the other day I had Anson Dorrance on, who was the women's soccer coach from UNC, and 21 national championships, won 1,000 games over the course of his career. And, he's coached some of the best, Mia Hamm, the whole story of, he told that the definition of a true champion, he told on the show the other day. And, it's definitely been, it's a much harder road, I think. And, I come from, a family with 3 sisters. My sister growing up, played on a lot of boys sports and things like that, where it's just been different. It's a different path that they take. Susie Petroselli in her book, she talks about, the path that she had to take. But in this case, I mean, as it sounds to me that there's almost like 2 key parts to this. One is she actually had the, positive vibes herself to say, I'm going to make this happen.
She took control. Exactly.
But she also had a couple key people in her life that played that role of mentor for her.
Absolutely. Well, but here's the other thing that's heartbreaking also. Now, fast forward to her graduation. She graduated last winter. And she had an agent, she met through Wilson, my brother-in-law, who orchestrated her, coming to America. And between her agent and Becky Burley, they sat her down and they said, yes, you probably would be very high up on the draft pick, but we are going to suggest to you strongly that you do not try that route. They said, because you can't afford it. You will get paid, your starting salary will, if you're lucky, be $19,000 a year. You have nothing to fall back on here. Once you're picked by the draft, you will not necessarily get a contract. They get to try you out. They don't pay you while they try you out. You will be so stressed about not being able to send anything to your family, not being able to, you have no one giving you money. It would definitely, it would influence your playing. It would influence, psychologically, it would just be really, we suggest that you try your luck in Europe. And that's what you did, which is heartbreaking, and so she went to Norway, and then she spent a season in Norway, and then she went to Adelaide, spent a season in Adelaide, and now she went back to Brazil because we think she may be going to Sweden, but they're working on her visa.
Yeah. It's interesting because, here in the U.S., I think because, you have, so many major sports where, if you talk about Brazil, you're talking about one sport, you're talking about one major sport, you're talking about soccer. And, other countries you might have, soccer and, rugby, if it's New Zealand, and you have the All Blacks and teams like that. But here in the U.S., where you have football, basketball, baseball, hockey, I think, some of the women's sports and the women's athletes, it's almost like they take that back step because they're behind there. And what we're seeing, though, right now is with the lawsuit that's going on with U.S. soccer, where the women are demanding equal rights. And I think it's absolutely fantastic that they're doing this. And, what's really interesting, too, is, and I didn't really get into it with Anson Dorrance, but, one of his former players, Cindy Parlow is just elected as the new president of the U.S. Soccer Federation.
Yeah.
How important is that? Just that alone. That, she's the president of USA, Soccer Federation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it's hugely important. I don't know her, myself. I'm hoping, but people that I really respect are very excited about this and are very sort of, hopeful. I think that's another thing. One of the things, I always get asked when I speak, at least once, and I actually love this question because it's such a really, it's a real question that brings a lot of confusion is, how can women players demand equal pay when they don't make as much as the men, or they don't bring in as much of an audience as the men? And there's so many different answers to that question. I think that also, and I often get like, how can a woman want to make as much as Neymar, right? And I think there's so many answers to that question. There's so many levels of different approaches. One that I always start with is that nobody wants to make as much as Neymar, and nobody should make as much as Neymar but Neymar. No woman or man. Right. But also the pay structure is so, and obviously there's a reason for it, right? Confusing, because we don't want to make it too transparent for many reasons, especially in European football and because of the trading and all that money that goes involved. Neymar, what he makes is not his salary. His salary is completely different, even though we still don't want to make as much of Neymar. His salary is not that number that you see. But also, it's super important to understand the difference between clubs and U.S. soccer and FIFA, right? And like the International Olympic Committee. Those are non-for-profit organizations.
Right, exactly.
Very strict, mission statements, are required that they support all the sports equally. Well, and that's a very big difference.
I've seen this firsthand, even in lacrosse. And, here in lacrosse, and I complained, and I'll probably get crap about this, but I complained years ago to U.S. Lacrosse. I was at the U.S. Lacrosse Convention as a speaker, and I ran into one of the players who I'm very good friends with, and she asked me to buy raffle tickets from her. And I'm like, what are you selling raffle tickets for? She's like, oh, we have to sell it to raise money for, the national team, to pay for our World Cup trip. And I'm like, do the guys have to sell raffle tickets? And she said, no, they don't. I go, that's ridiculous. Give me all the raffle tickets you have, and I'm going to buy them all.
Yeah.
And I won there was a iPad, and I won the iPad. And I called up the woman who basically, said, oh, you won. I said, I hope so, because I bought all the tickets. Here's your iPad. And I said, I want to talk to who's in charge and who put this together, because I just don't think it's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's they especially FIFA, they are very enjoying greatly that non-for-profit status. You know what I mean? And if you look, one of my very good friends is now the head of the women's division of FIFPro, and they're going through a lot of just going back in and going through a lot of the regulations just to see. And I have to tell you, one thing and one example in particular is, FIFA, who has let's just pretend they don't have $2 billion in the bank. Let's just pretend that we're doing this,
Okay.
They're, it's like, just for example, the delegation that goes to the World Cup, the men are allowed 50 people. The women's delegation is allowed 37. There's no explanation. The men's delegation flies first class everywhere. Everyone, ball boy, everyone. Women's delegation flies coach when they're going 4 hours or more. Otherwise, they fly, they fly business when they're going 4 hours or more. Otherwise, they all fly coach. So this entire World Cup in Europe, the U.S. national team flew coach. Separated from each other in different seats, before, and it's not about, it's before a game, sometimes the day before a game, and we have national teams, from countries, men's national teams from countries that literally would not make it past the round of 16, that the entire delegation of 50 flew first class.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
That's not even legal, honestly, under their mission statement.
You're talking about national governing bodies, or governing bodies of the sport, and that's where I also look at it. It's like, you want to draw a line. I mean, that's like saying, okay, me as a former professional lacrosse player, when I was playing, should I have said, oh, I want to make the same money as Darryl Strawberry playing for the Mets because I'm a professional lacrosse player? Like, no, that's not realistic.
No.
But however, if you're both playing for your national team and that's who's paying for it, well,
right,
it should be even.
And it's non-for-profit, so the decisions shouldn't be made based on profit, And it's about equitable treatment, not just about equality.
Right.
It's about it's actually about your comfort level the day before you go play a game. It's not about who gets the fancier what,
Yeah. It was amazing, when I used to be the president of the Long Island Lizards of Major League Lacrosse, and we were having league meetings. And back in the day, one of the teams was out in Los Angeles, and they were owned by the Galaxy. The LA Galaxy owned that team. And Sunil Gulati, who used to be the president of U.S. Soccer, I knew Sunil well, and we had done some work together. He said, listen, any chance that you can come out a couple days early, the USA women's soccer team is training. I know you're a soccer fan. Would you want to come out and watch the women's team train? I'm like, are you kidding me? So literally, it was me, Sunil Gulati, and just the women's team. And I was
That's a
watching them train. And talk about a treat for me. And
yeah,
what I came away saying was, if you want to see, they were doing small-sided, like 4-on-4 games. They were killing each other.
yeah,
Killing each other. Like literally, it was physical. They were going so hard. I was like, I wish someone was videotaping this right now,
yeah.
because these are just pure phenomenal athletes just going at it. And then at the same time, and oh God, I wish I remember who it was. I probably could look it up with her name. But one of the women was recovering from an ACL, and she was by herself, and she was doing wind sprints on her own. And I looked over and he saw me staring at her, and he's like, "Yeah, by herself, just crushing
Yeah,
it." And I'm like, it's just amazing.
they
It's
are
just awesome to
amazing.
see.
Yeah,
And then I said to Anson Dorrance, I said, to be honest with you, I go, I'd rather watch women's soccer than I do men. I think the men are
yeah.
just way too dramatic.
Well, I have to say, when I was shooting in Brazil with Santos, and I shot the women's team, and the same thing. We were, my cinematographer is like this awesome guy, and we really wanted this because we wanted a fresh eye, because we wanted to show the sport in a way people hadn't seen it before, and I knew that being a first-time director of like my co-director and I being first-time directors of a long, a feature-length documentary. If we had a pro soccer cinematographer, it'd be very hard for them to listen to us say, "Don't do it that way." You know what I mean? Because they know what they're doing. They're doing
Sure.
so we had someone, and he had never seen a soccer game in his life before starting on this,
Oh my God.
and we were shooting, and he was like, he couldn't believe it, like the way they were going. And then we talked to, and this was at the time that Emily Lima, who was the women's coach for the national team in Brazil for like 10 months. She was actually the coach for the Santos women, the Sereias. And they had allowed her to bring her whole coaching staff. And they're not there anymore. But I remember talking to the goal, and for a while, the goalkeeper was the young woman that we were following. And so we watched her train. And then the goal keeper, the trainer, came to us, and we were walking out with him when we were done. And he's like, when they go on away games, we stay here and we help out and train the men. And he's like, they don't work half as hard. And I was like, of course they don't.
Right.
Would you if you didn't have to?
Yeah. I love
You
it.
know what I mean?
Yeah. That's fantastic. Now, during this documentary, and when can everyone, start to watch this? When's it going
So I'm hoping, that's the thing. We're talking to distributors right now. We'll be done editing in about June. I would say June, and it really depends on which distributor we go with. I think that they'll know what they want for their sort of platform and how they want to do this. I think if we end up going with somebody that's more like Sony Pictures, I guess maybe they'll want to do festivals. If we end up going straight to streaming, they may want to drop it right away. I'm really not sure, and actually I'm not. I don't know as much. I'm learning fast, but I don't know as much about that part of the business in terms of long form documentaries. So yeah.
Sure.
So, but my hope is that you'll be able to see it by, September.
Well, we'll talk off air. Maybe I can help you with some of that stuff too.
Oh, good. We'll take all the help we can get.
Put you in front of some great people. In the documentary, I was reading the article that was in the Guardian about the documentary, and it was talking about some of the amazing women who appear in this documentary. I mean, you have women, that aren't soccer players, like, Billie Jean King, who has been literally at the forefront of women's equality in sport. And, the founder of the Women's Sports Foundation. What was it like to have people like that as part of it?
Well, that was the dream, and the idea was to, there's so much of the theme of this, one of the great themes of this documentary, which is very cool, because some of the themes, like we knew we were, Susie and I kind of thought had an idea of what we were going to get, but a lot of the themes like sort of revealed themselves as you interview people, right? You see like but one of the major themes is, sticking together, right? Much like the U.S. national team does. And so, we thought it would be really amazing to have women who, because, tennis it seems to be one of the sports that has was one of the first, right, to ask for equality and to sort of, you know, push for that and to fight for it and to unite. And so we thought it would be great because essentially in my head, I hope it does many things, but essentially the real idea of this film was to have young girls like Lais all over the world feel seen.
Right.
To get a lot of really amazing people on one, you know, 90 minutes and say, like, we see you, you know, this is amazing. What you do is amazing. Examples of other women doing the same thing that are amazing. Just all, you know, so that they could see it, so that their friends could see it, so that their little brothers and little, you know, and everyone could see it. So I thought it would be really amazing to have, and important to have women who have been fighting for so long, regardless of what sport it was. And Billie Jean is, you know, she's like the OG queen of all everything. So
Yeah, everything started with her. I mean, when she kicked Bobby Riggs' ass on national TV in a tennis match 1-on-1.
But also there's that amazing story about how, you know, she's very close and very mentoring. She was very close. She is very close and was, she mentored Judy Foudy a lot through their protest.
Julie's unbelievable.
She's unbelievable. And then we also interviewed Abby Wambach, who remembers being 19 when Julie Foudy called her and said, don't play, because because Billie said to Julie, if you have to stop. If you say we're not playing, but then you also have to get the younger team and say they're not, because they'll just bring in the younger team if you say younger, you know. Right. So they had to. So Billie's like, reach out. Some of you find like 2 or 3 girls that you know and reach out to them and ask them not to play. So then we have sort of, you know, the story where Billie talks about that, and then Julie talks about what it was like getting that, you know, calling the girls, and then Abby talks about what it was like being 19 and getting that call and having to make that decision, thinking she may never get asked again.
Well, I'm a huge Abby Wambach fan as well.
Me too.
You know, her the speech that she gave, her graduation speech a couple of years ago,
that was amazing.
Demanding the ball.
Yeah.
And I shared that with every girl I've ever coached because I just thought that was so important. It's that, you know, it's okay to demand the ball. It's okay to demand what's important for you. To say, give it to me. I'm gonna be okay with it. To take on that responsibility. And that's the same thing that's going on right now. You know, when you're looking at, you know, these young girls, to be able to say, hey, here are people that you can look up to and say, and know what they all said? They said, give me the ball. Yeah. Now, what are you going to do when you get the ball?
And that's a life lesson, right? I mean, that's a life lesson.
That's the future generation of champions.
Yeah. And that can be applied to anything in life, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, from, you know, Sheryl Sandberg and, you know, leaning in and her book. It's funny because I coached so many girls and I grew up in my great aunt, who I grew up with, was a women's professional baseball player. So like the movie awesome. A League of Their Own. And so it was just so funny kind of growing up with her and, you know, having a catch with her and, you know, hearing her stories, how she pitched against her brother. And my mom was a golfer and a bowler. God, did she want me to be a golfer. But here's a lesson for everyone. She wanted me to be a golfer so bad that I hated it. So don't push your kids. Let your kids find out what they want. But luckily for my mom, who's a single mom, raised us on her own, she let me play everything. She let me play everything. And so much so that I went into college. I played 3 sports in college. And so, you know, but sports are so important. And especially to young girls, the statistics are off the charts. You know, Sports Illustrated, and I think it was Ernst & Young, they did a study a couple of years ago, and of the top CEOs, women CEOs, the top 400 CEOs in the country, 80% of them had played some type of team sport in high school or college. Yeah, that's incredible. That's an incredible stat. Because it's the life lessons that you do learn on the field and in battle. Yeah.
I also think it has to do with, like, you know, I think of Lais and what she's gone through and her determination. I also wonder sometimes also, you know, were those women already sort of, because of the time in which they were coming up as women in sports, did they already have this sort of grit, determination, and sort of, you know, personality trait that also lends itself to making it, you know what I mean, in C-suites. And I think that that's also really important, is to look at, you know, that sort of no quit mentality, because I know we're not necessarily all born with it, but you can definitely adopt it. You can definitely learn it to a certain extent, and you can, you know, to use it, you know, as far as you can take it.
Yeah, what's kind of amazing is I have a separate company. I won't even talk about it, but you know, on my board, I have 3 men and 3 women. And in the beginning, I was actually going to make this company just for girls and women only. And I asked the women, the 3 board members, before I had male board members, you know, what are their thoughts on that? And they said, you know what, Dave, we need people like you out there who have girls, who are pushing the envelope for them as well. So I don't think you should just, you know, not include the other sex because of that. And I think, you know, finding the right people to make this happen, you know, that's what it can. And
Yeah,
you know, that's
I agree.
you know, I want my girls to be empowered. I want them to, you know, feel like they can do anything that they want.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're in your movie and documentary, when you're bringing on, you know, powerful women like Billie Jean King, Abby Wambach, Alex Morgan, come on. That's a message for these girls. That's so crucial.
I hope so. Yeah.
You know?
And you know, one of the things that I wanted to mention that I really loved about the lawsuit, because there's always a little bit of, you know, the American players in the lawsuit. It's like, you know, what are you complaining about? You live, you know, you have it much better than a lot of people. And you know, something that I noticed in our travels is that when we were shooting, is that there wasn't a day, you know, and other people also ask me, you know, often I have people say, well, you know, they're not going to win. They have a contract. And, you know, there wasn't a day that went by, really, that anywhere in the places that we went, that some girl didn't mention the lawsuit. We were in the back of a mosque on a dirt floor with these girls in Zanzibar who, you know, were playing after work and helping out at home and everything, and many of them hiding from their parents and sitting around waiting to change the film, to change the battery in the camera. And they're telling Susie and I, you know, with one girl who had a moderate, you know, grasp on English, and everyone's talking at her, and she's saying how cool they think it is, and they don't understand what it is, but they know the American women are standing up for themselves and demanding respect. And, you know, I tell people, it's not about, they already won. You know,
Right.
How much more are we talking about this than we ever talk about women's sports ever? You know,
Right.
And there are girls out everywhere seeing them stand up for themselves. So they already won. You know, it's not about, you know, I think people miss the point when they well, no, I'm sure they're sitting at home going, no, we haven't, we need more money. And I get that. But I mean, you know, what they've done is really incredible. And what they've done because they can. Because in many places, when the whole team gets together and says, if you don't do this, we're not going to play, they're like, great, we didn't want you to play anyway, you know? But the Americans are in a position where they can do this, and they can stand up for other girls. And I think that's really cool.
It's amazing to me, obviously, with Title IX and the advances of Title IX, and, you know, the opportunities that has opened up for girls and sports, and, you know, more equality. But I remember even little things when I was coaching, you know, my kids when they were in 5th and 6th grade, where, you know, we got a brand new turf field put in at our high school, and the boys were always practicing on the turf, and the girls were allowed to have it one Sunday during the entire spring. That was the girls' day. And one of the coaches who was coaching with me, one of the moms, she's like, no. We're not getting it one day. This is insane. Like, how can you literally say that to the girls? You're allowed to have it one day. Otherwise, it's just for the boys. Like, it's just BS. So, you know, I'm always fighting for the girls.
Yeah, well, that's good.
So, you know, a couple of other things I just wanted to touch. You know, when girls in the United States, and it's interesting that you mentioned these girls in Zanzibar. You know, girls in the United States, they do have a lot more opportunities. What is it like for young girls in other parts of the world to be able to play sports? I mean, because I'm sure that with, you know, sexism in other countries, that you might have situations where girls aren't even allowed to play sports.
Yes, well, yeah, in Zanzibar, they're not really allowed in school to play, it has a lot of, there are a lot of reasons. It's interesting, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this movie, because this is something that really interests me and always has, is the gender equality in general, and how all of the issues of society are reflected in sport, especially football, because it's the world sport, right? So, there's been other films about it, sort of, racism, poverty, inequalities, all reflected in the game, and as is gender. Because so the nature of the sexism that each country sort of has in its culture is reflected in the game. So sort of Zanzibar, the problem is that they want to be they don't want the girls to wear hijabs, not take off their hijabs, or they don't want them bumping into the boys. So, and they don't want the boys watching. So like in school, for example, girls don't do gym. They go read while the boys play in the yard. And there's a lot of initiatives. And so now there's a lot of initiatives with the Department of Health to just try to find solutions for that, because there's a high rate of diabetes and joint problems with women as they get older. And they're trying to find ways just by, so girls can have this practice and that practice, but then you need somewhere for them to change. So, right. So it's a whole, and it's always reflected. I mean, I know in Brazil, I remember reading this article from the Telegraph in 2015, where there was a gentleman that the Brazilian Federation had sort of given the job of promoting the women's division, and he did an article for the Telegraph saying that now things were going to get better, because they were going to have shorter skirts, and shorter shorts and tighter shirts. And they were going to ask them to wear makeup, so the game was going to be more attractive. He said nobody wants to see a girl play who looks like a boy. Right. 2015.
How crazy is that? I'm shutting off all my office phones. I forgot to do that.
That's okay.
2015. It's nuts. It's nuts.
And that's because in Brazil, it's very important that women look beautiful, and that should be, and that and a lot of the times it's interesting. I mean, I guess I'm not. I feel like I'm super cynical sometimes, and I maybe not as much as I think, because I didn't really see that it was always like a nefarious sort of calculated thing. I really truly think these people think this is the way to get people to come. You know what I mean? So it's layers of problems, I really do believe those parents, and there are the majority of the parents in Zanzibar, the thing is, people love their kids. They love their kids everywhere, as misguided as it may seem. And they terrified for, we're all terrified that our kids are going to suffer, that they're going to, so a lot of it comes from that, a lot of prejudice, a lot of it comes from that. And a lot of it has to do, I think, in a lot of these countries with, education, educating, whatever, the Ministry of Sports trying to educate the general public on the importance of sports, and then the Ministry of Health talking about the importance of sports. And local imams have joined and sort of in their prayers and religious time would talk about how there's nowhere in their teachings historically that says that women shouldn't practice sport, and dispel some ideas that have been adopted and misguided. But and so I think, to answer your question, it's if you look at the country and see the issues of women in the country, that's pretty much the issue with women in the sport.
Yeah, which is crazy. But even you talk about education and the educational system, it's amazing. I was having this conversation the other day at how we've taken physical education and gym out of schools, and they. Someone was saying the other day, oh yeah, my son doesn't even have an opportunity to have gym, and he's in 6th grade. And I'm like, and then I watched a great, I think it was on a TED Talk about a different school that they built in Japan, and how much of it was around the kids being able to physically do things while learning, and how their learning curve literally just went off the charts, because these kids are constantly moving. They don't have assigned seating. They literally, the classroom opens up to an outdoor area where if a kid gets bored and he's in the middle of the class, he can just go out, do a lap around, come out, come back. When he comes back, and they're better prepared to learn. I think we need to make some changes with our education system. There's no doubt about that. The physical education. And same thing as I've said it forever. You know, I have some. You know, one of my daughters is very, very autistic. You know, I don't think they do enough with arts and sciences. You
Yeah,
know,
and those are all peripheral, right? I find that like arts and gym, they're the first things to be cut. Music, you know, which is so short-sighted, I think.
we need to go back to old school. We need to go back to when they actually had shop class, when they taught you how to build
Yes,
something.
yes. Oh, and
You did
can we also please teach civics? And can we also please
civics.
teach people how to file their taxes?
Yeah,
Because it's
civics.
literally how our country works, and no one knows how to do it.
Yeah, how to manage a checkbook. You
Yeah,
know, with
yeah. What's a
basic.
deductible? I think I would love it if my fifth grader was learning what a deductible is.
Yeah, this is awesome. So a couple of things. So we always end the Elevate Academy with 3 questions. So the
Okay.
first question comes from our prior guest. Now, our prior guest was Kylie O'Miller. She literally has the NCAA record for most points ever in a career in lacrosse. She had 498 points, 3-time All-American from Stony Brook University right here
Amazing.
on Long Island.
Stony Brook.
Yeah, she's
I'm in Queens,
literally
so
she's literally the new face of lacrosse. She's got an endorsement
that's
deal with
awesome.
New Balance, and she's literally one of the
That's
nicest
amazing.
people. She's just pure, genuine. She's just a great person. Literally, young girls looking up to her, and she plays the game fiercely. It's so awesome. You'd love her if you met her. But her question that she had for you is, in this whole process of you putting this together, are there any regrets that you had? And that you maybe would go back and change now after the fact of, you know, what you're trying.
It was I don't know. It was so insane and so just the best year of my life. You know, it was so amazing, so crazy the way things happened, because we literally would get calls, you know, and say like, you know, this person would really, you know, I mean, as it started to snowball. I don't know what I would do differently. I don't know that I could do something differently. I do have things I wish that, you know, had been different. Like
Right.
if we had more time, you know, I wish,
More money.
like money, yes, money to be able to think about more, you know, to like sort of lay out a plan as opposed to be so opportunistic about where we went. I would love to have gone to Asia. We don't have a team, you know, we didn't go, you know, and that takes a whole other world of planning and money, and, you know, but I would love to have gone to you know, speak to young girls in Asia, and a team in Asia. On a personal level, I wish I'd been less anxious about the interviews in the beginning. It definitely softened up, but I was so overwhelmed with the task of talking to these incredible people, and I was terrified to be prying, because I'm not a journalist, but I was terrified. I was terrified to be prying. I also didn't want to be leading, because I wanted to hear what they had to say. I
Sure.
didn't, you know, I wanted to have sort of a continuity, so that, you know, at some point they spoke about relatively the same things. And I wanted, you know, and I don't know. And I also felt like I was completely not worthy of even, you know, of like sitting there and asking them some of these women these questions, right? It
Right.
definitely got better, but in the very beginning, I just wish I'd enjoyed it more. And, you know, because a lot of these women, they were, you know, and when I did start enjoying it is when I realized that everybody wants to talk.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
listen, I
I'm
didn't have to
actually
pull
shocked.
anybody's
I'm
teeth.
shocked to hear that, because you're such an easy interview yourself, and you're so easy to talk to. I'm actually surprised that
But
you.
I was nervous. Well, that's what I mean. I was nervous because, you know, I wasn't, you know, to me in the beginning, I thought like, they're going to be like, who's this person? Like, who's this woman coming to ask me these questions? And what is she even doing? You know, what is she even, you know? And so it definitely didn't take long before I felt better, because
Right.
people were so lovely and so willing to help, and willing to speak. But I think those are the things. Yeah. Money, time, and, you know, but I think that's always sort of the, you know, to have the privilege of knowing
Sure.
hindsight, you know, but yeah.
Well, listen, you know, I'm the worst. So I could, like, even like when I'm doing practices and I tell people practice is over at 2:00, I'm like, I'm still on the field at 2:05 because I just can't get enough. So I just thought of another thing though, too. What, you know, while we're sitting here and I got you know, what's the biggest takeaway that you want people to have from this film? What's the biggest takeaway?
my gosh.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, I think, listen, today, I'll tell you today, I guess it depends, like, it depends
Yeah.
how I'm feeling. But today, the biggest takeaway, I mean, today, the most, to me, emotionally, right? Because I'm not, like, I never wanted this film to, like, preach or teach. I just wanted people to see how amazingly passionate these women are, and girls are, and how amazingly talented, how hard they work, how incredible they are at what they do, how beautiful their game is. Because, it is the same game, but it's not the same game necessarily, because just, the physiognomies, it's a beautiful, beautiful game. And I guess what I wanted people to take away is that the reasons for them to not be succeeding the way they should be, and not be making enough money to support themselves, and not be having, enjoying more than 4% of, sports media attention, are completely fabricated and are completely unnecessary.
Right. Well,
They
listen,
really don't exist. They're like these problems that are created by things that have nothing to do with how beautiful the sport is, with how many people want to watch it, whether people think that or not. It's not true. They're completely, their stories, they're reasons that just don't need to exist. And I think, and I want the public to be a little bit outraged maybe, and start demanding to see them more.
well, I love that. I mean, that's like, you gave us two takeaways right there, which are awesome. And
Yeah.
what's really interesting is, we have a lot of young girls that are watching this, even young boys that are watching this, and parents, and lovers of sports, and we have soccer fans. It doesn't even matter. You said it, Anson Dorrance said it, Kylie O'Miller said it. To all you young kids out there, it's like, fall in love with your sport and be really good at it. Use that passion. Be passionate about it. Because if it's important to you and you want to play at the next level, you have to have a passion for it. And if you don't, go find something that you have a passion for. Even in your case, Kelly, you grew up as a daughter of Pele and didn't play soccer, but now you're doing something that you love. Arts, filmmaking. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
all right. So now your job now is you have to ask a question of our next guest. So our next guest is John Danowski, who is the head men's lacrosse coach at Duke University. And he's also the head coach for Team USA men's lacrosse. So what's a question that you would like John Danowski to answer on our next show?
Oh my goodness. I feel like I don't know enough about.
Doesn't have to be about lacrosse.
I want to make it a good one. I want to make it a good one. It
could be about anything.
I'm sorry. Say it again. He's the head coach of
at Duke.
Of lacrosse, at Duke of men's lacrosse.
Right.
Okay, and
he's also Team USA head coach as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I think a question. Okay, I think I have a good question, because I this comes just from talking to Becky Burley and talking about the young women she coaches, right, which is a very different sort of picture of women going into sports. But so I guess, what would he say to, what is it that it takes, aside from just talent, that he sees from all of his probably amazing students at Duke, right? But it's a very small percentage that goes pro. Right, that gets to. So what is it, for girls and boys? What would he say is the, does he see, aside from just being really, really, good at what you do, right? What separates, I suppose, the pros from the young people who will do something else?
I love that. I actually talked about that the other day, because a good friend of mine who I used to speak with on the road all the time, Dennis Kimbrough, wrote a great book of what makes the great great. Like, what separates you? And I don't care.
That's like the $60 million question, right? It's like
one of my favorite books growing up was, and it's funny, it was written in the 1920s by Napoleon Hill. It's called Think and Grow Rich. And the funny thing is, it's not a great title, because it's not about being rich. It's really about the power of positive mindset. Right. And Dennis Kimbrough, who's African-American, he was interviewing every top African-American person in any realm: science, sports, medicine, entertainment, real estate. And he got a phone call from the Napoleon Hill Foundation, and they said, listen, we want you to come here and meet with us. And they said, if you think what you were doing was unique, it wasn't. Napoleon Hill was doing the same thing, and he was writing a book called Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. When he passed away, he wrote the first 100 pages. We want you to finish the book. And Dennis actually finished that book. So now it's like whenever I meet someone famous, I always ask him, like, what makes you so great? And so I love that. I love that's your question. So now the last question for the Elevate Academy for you, and this is what we always end with, is what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, and who did you get it from?
It's going to be very abstract, okay? And I don't know if it was advice, and this is also in retrospect because I use it a lot.
It's okay.
It's metaphor. It's almost a metaphor, but I did a photography workshop one time, and I actually can't remember the name of the one. I was very young. This is right after college, and we had several instructors. So I can't remember who it was, but we talk a lot in school about the empty spaces, right? In a picture, in any kind of photography or in any kind of layout that you're doing for a magazine, right? That the empty spaces, the negative spaces, what we call, should be as interesting as your subject matter. And that's one of the things that makes a great picture, is when they're like, if you black out everything that you're supposed to be looking at, is the negative space interesting? Is it compelling? Is it, and
right.
I sort of metaphorically use that a lot for myself, for everything, right? Because we always think about like the important things we're doing and everything else is everything else, right? Yeah. But I do feel like, metaphorically, just remember that, remember not to neglect your negative space.
Don't neglect your negative space.
Yeah, don't neglect. That. There's nothing.
I'm not a great picture taker, but
the empty spaces are important, right?
I'm gonna hopefully put this up there, and everyone's gonna be able to see it. But this was my picture from today, and it's my.
Oh, there's the love. That's awesome.
There's my love picture with.
I love that your dog is like chilling.
Yeah, so she's the best. But everyone, how do people stay in touch to know more about this? What's the website for the documentary?
Well, I have I would say like my Instagram, or Susie's like the queen of Twitter. So everyone will know on Susie Petrocelli Twitter will know. My Twitter is Casa Kely. I don't tweet as much as because I'm a picture person. So my Instagram is I am Kely Nascimento, and you'll know there. And you'll know on Susie Petrocelli's Twitter 100%. So we do have a website. It's called Warrior Women of Football. But you're definitely going to know on either my Instagram or her Twitter first. So
Warrior Women of Football is the web page. When we repost this, I'll make sure we put the links for your Instagram and Susie's Instagram
and Susie's Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, Susie, thank you so much for putting us together. I know you're listening. Kely, this was awesome for me. I literally can't wait. As someone who loves women's soccer and grew up watching them win the World Cup in '91 all the way through the 99ers and that whole crew. It's amazing. And as a father of 3 daughters, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for keep pushing the envelope. And not only will I be excited to see this Warriors of a Beautiful Game, but I'm going to be watching for what you have coming out next.
Thank you.
That, whatever it may be. So thanks for coming on the Elevate Academy. We appreciate you so much, and have a great weekend. Stay safe in New York, and everyone else out there, be safe. We're going to get through this.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon, Kel.
You too.
Bye-bye.